Good afternoon and welcome to our first panel of this Network Performing Art Production Workshop 2022. It's a pleasure and an honor to chair this panel today, and we have the first topic today is what we learned, what happens to us, to the world of performing arts and tutoring and lessons after the pandemic. The United Nations Department of Economics and Social Affairs defined the status of what happened with the pandemic with the following words: "We are facing a global health crisis unlike any in the 75 years history of the United Nations. But this is much more than a health crisis. It's a human, economic, and social crisis, attacking societies at their core." I think that is very, very true, in particular for us, a world where we rely so much on physical presence, on being on stage, on playing together, or looking at each other in the eyes. And so my first question for our panelists today is about that. And before asking the question, I just would like to introduce the panelists I have the pleasure to be accompanied with today. And they are, we have Tania Lisboa, Reader in Performance Science and Digital Learning from the Royal College of Music, UK. We have Lucia Di Cecca, Professor at the Rome Santa Cecilia Conservatory in Italy. Anne Doyle, Community Engagement Manager and Higher Education and Cultural Program for Internet 2. We have Jesper Andersen, Course Coordinator and Associate Professor at the Royal Danish Academy of Music. And David Spencer, Trumpet Professor at the University of Memphis and University, Memphis, yes. My first question for you is, would you like to share something about something you learned about in this pandemic? It could be a success story, something nice that you like something you managed to do and you didn't think it was possible, or a failure that you would like to share, a lesson learned, something that didn't work very well, but allowed you to plan better for the future, or some sort of story of adaptation, ingenuity, collaboration that was possible because of the new remote possibilities enabled by the pandemic. So should we just go this way, and then yes, but if you don't mind, you will be the last one just for the path of this panel.
Okay.
Lucia.
So yes, so I come from Italy, and you know that Italy was probably the first country to be affected by the pandemic, and so and university closed at the beginning of March 2020, and we were asked to do distance lessons. And so I think I'm here because I am a normal piano teacher, which means someone who has no knowledge about technology. And so what I did immediately was to organize a lesson with my class through Skype. And I think that you can understand that it was a complete disaster. So I'm a normal piano lesson, but I'm a lucky one because I have one friend who is a special friend, and is Claudio Allocchio. So when I was so desperate, I called him. And he gave to me the basic information about platforms, communication platforms, and how to compare them. And what I did in the following 2 weeks was testing with my students the different platforms and different settings, and decide what was our best solution for what I wanted to do. And so my success story is that at the end of these 2 terrifying weeks, we found a way. And I think that our lessons became quite profitable. And what happened then? That, you remember probably that in those months, everybody was sharing resources. And probably you know the European Association of Conservatoires. They created a page on their website for sharing resources. And I suggested, I told them, but everything is so useful and important and relevant, but what people need is a very basic knowledge. Why don't you write a guide for dummies, for those who know nothing about technology and distance lessons? And after a couple of days, they called me and said, why don't you write this guide? And so I wrote a guide for dummies, which is very, very simple, very, very basic, just some screenshots telling what you have to do if you know nothing about technology. Just summarizing my personal experience. So this is my story.
Thank you.
And I think that this guide was used in Europe. And what I discovered was that it was written in English and in Italian, but after just a few days, someone from Spain, I didn't know him, sent me a message, can I translate it in Spanish? Huh. So it was also translated in Spanish, because what people need is really basic information. If you are lucky, if you have more knowledge, and knowledge, of course, you need much more. Otherwise, you need really basic information.
Thank you. And I think that's so crucial that we, as a community, we start from the beginning, from the basics. And it's so amazing that other people are then coming and contributing and nurturing that. So, yeah, thank you very much for that.
That's great. So one of the things I learned the minute everything shut down, all of my friends, I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where the University of Michigan is. So many of my friends are faculty. They were all calling me desperately for help. And I learned that over the years, I have really become an administrator and wasn't really doing much hands-on technology. So that was very sobering because I didn't really know how to be helpful. But at the same time, I also had a challenge that had nothing to do with my Internet 2 job. One night a week, my entire adult life, I teach guitar students. So I have students. And I didn't know how I was going to keep doing my lessons. And I knew that whatever I learned I could also be helpful to my friends who were faculty in trying to figure this out. And so my story about that part is really simple. And David Spencer and one of Jesper's colleagues, I called David and I said, David, what are you doing? And he wonderfully said he had bought 4 microphones and they all had to be under $50 US in price. Because I would be willing to spend a lot of money to get myself a good microphone, but my problem was I needed to hear my students. And I couldn't ask them to spend a lot of money. So he recommended the little Samsung Go mic. It was $49 on Amazon. And I said to all of my students, I want each of you to buy one of these. There was a wonderful video that one of Jesper's colleagues, and Jesper, I don't remember who it was, but it was somebody from Royal Danish Academy of Music, how to use Zoom video in original audio mode, original sound mode. And so each of my students bought the little microphone, and I gave each of them a lesson at no charge and helped them get it set up, helped them turn on original sound. And it was the difference between, I can't do this, I literally can't hear them, to being able to teach lessons happily, effectively. And so again, so simple and with the help of others. I was able to save for me, my most cherished night of the week is the night of the week that I teach. So thank you, David, and Jasper, your colleague.
Samsung Gomik is the same that I bought.
It is wonderful.
Claudio suggested me to buy
Yes.
Samsung Gomik.
Very good. Very cheap and works.
Thank you. That's so nice to see. Sometimes very little things, like the right settings, the right place, can make a huge difference. That I remember that video, Jesper, and it helped me a lot as well. And that's the kind of thing we need as a community: little things and little help from each other. And I think that's what makes this community so valuable. That we never hesitate to help each other, and so hopefully for those of you who joined today for the first time, I think this is one of the things I really would like to share and to communicate, that we care about each other. So we are a community, and we are not a large community, but we are very much a community that look after each other. Tanya.
Thank you, Domenico. So I'm a cellist and a teacher, and like Anne and Lucia, I think I've been teaching quite a lot as well online on Zoom. And I think today here I'm wearing a different hat, but I can talk about both experiences as a researcher at the Royal College of Music, a researcher in digital learning. And this is on the back of 15 years managing all the video conferencing work at the ICM with using the high-end tech. And of course, with the pandemic, everything went down to almost zero. We kept things going, but like everybody else, we had to change. And what I wanted to talk about, two little stories as well. Well, one is not a story, it's based on research, actually. The other one is a story. Which I think with no doubt the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted our practices as musical educators across the world. But the result of this was this radical change, which we called a digital turn. And I'm using this term because I was asked to edit a whole volume for the Music Education Research Journal in the UK about the emergency teaching that we were all doing. And as a teacher and as a researcher reading that, it was very disruptive, it was very difficult, but I would like to point to the positives of it as well. So I made a little list here. And this is based on teachers' reports in music, right? So the first thing which we saw was a much higher level of involvement of these teachers in lesson planning. I think the more traditional way of teaching, that the student comes, brings the repertoire, plays to you, you react to it, was changing to what am I going to do in this session, and really do a real amount of planning, workloads, people are complaining how much work this takes and so on. But I think that's positive because it led to a lot more reflection on the part of the teachers, and that reflection, that planning, having a plan B in case the technology didn't work, I think it was transformed into different approach to teaching for that medium. We were no longer trying to replicate what we do in person, which is completely, in my view, wrong. To think that distance learning is, you do the same thing as you do face-to-face, you transfer to a screen. That doesn't work. So you have to be creative. Teachers were using recordings, and instead of listening to the student play, just listening to recordings and discussing. So all this reflection, I think, is very positive. And the result in the students was that, in my view, it developed a lot more autonomy and independence, because you had to transform this embodied way of teaching, touching the student and demonstration. Sound quality wasn't good enough. You couldn't do that. So you have to be more descriptive. You have to think more. How am I going to explain this to my student? And the student has to then transfer, what do I really have to do, and really reflect. So I think that the use of technology then, not just networked, was explored to a higher degree, and this will have effects on all of us in the future. I think there's no way that we're going to go back to the traditional teaching. Well, I shouldn't say there's no way, because I think people are trying hard to do that, but the students are demanding that we don't do that. They want those lessons
Interesting.
in blended learning, if you like. The other very quick thing I want to mention is another project which was between the UK and Brazil in South America. And we were collecting data and delivering music interventions in person for families affected by Zika virus in there. And suddenly that had to stop. And we couldn't stop. We couldn't leave the families without the interventions. So we decided to pay for their internet credits in their mobile phones in the middle of nowhere, so we could deliver the interventions for those families. And in my view, I think what that generated was a completely new way of doing research. It generated new methods of data collection online, which we were not aware of, and we're writing about it now. We reached out to places that we couldn't imagine that we could go. And of course, now that places a real challenge on the network people. We don't have Internet 2 or GEON in South America. So that's, it's a field of work that for all of us to perhaps start to think about. Yeah. That's my contribution.
Thank you. And I think I completely agree with you. It's like teaching online or in a hybrid way is a completely different experience and needs to be thought in a different way. And this brings the reflective and reflexive practice that we are taught to put in practice as a practitioner in a completely to a completely new perspective in some way. And yes, more careful planning is something I've seen as well, and something that is definitely more important. You need to know exactly how to go from one place to another and figuring out about how do I substitute the touching and the looking at the gesture from using a camera. And but it's interesting that the students are saying they would like more of that. So they like that. They like the new experience. They would like more of the online or hybrid. That's a very interesting thing.
Sorry, is it?
No, I was just saying that. It was just a comment. Say from my point of view, it's interesting to see that there is an interest in seeing more of that hybrid distance learning, which is something quite interesting. David.
Well, yeah, I'm sharing all these same experiences, of course, which much of you have as well. I'll just say, I'm a performing artist, I'm a musician, I'm not a technologist, I'm not a network engineer. I'm always in awe when I come to this conference for a couple of reasons, but mostly because I'm around really smart people that have helped me quite a bit. I will say this, I think the most important thing we learned is that there's a giant gap between where most of the people in this room are and where the public were in terms of access and knowledge to be able to do this. I mean, I know we've all experienced that. I'm interested in here, how many people are actually educators in the room and not technology? Yeah. So I want to speak about something that I found profound through this. All of these things are true. I experience these things as well. But the biggest gap I think we found is really the adaptation of pedagogy and how teachers and musicians and thespians, theater teachers, dancers went about trying to adapt what we normally do and what we've done our whole lives onto this format of teaching through networks. I could speak about that for a long time, but for those of you who are not educators and who are in charge of these kind of technical things at your own institutions, I would say that's a huge component. It's not just the technology. I'm delighted that through our sessions today, we've heard everybody, Claudio, Jesper, talk about the fact that the technology really has to be transparent. I know we love the technology, but for me as an artist and as a teacher, I don't want my students, I don't want my listeners to know it's actually there. And the biggest compliment I think I received through all this, the biggest bit of feedback for me, often from my students and from people that were participating in a conference, was that, hey, it was like a normal lesson, or it was like you were in the room. And I started to deconstruct that a little bit, and it started to get me thinking about some of my background working in show business, believe it or not. I worked for the Disney company for a very long time. A long time ago, I took a class that I had as an elective that I didn't need to take, but I needed an easy A for my transcript. So I took this class called Acting for the Camera a long time ago. And it was just, I just had hoped to be around a bunch of, beautiful people, actually, which there were, with the exception of me. But interesting that, 25 years later, that actually played a huge role in how I adapted what I did to that situation. And I think that was a most difficult situation with all of our faculties and all of our teaching, is that there's such a lack of pedagogy. So one of the great things I think that came out of this, just from my own perspective, as an assignment during that pandemic, I made all of my students get a student to teach online. And because I thought, this is not something that's going to go away, and we all know that now. And it was a great source of income for all of them, and they learned to appreciate the possibilities that the reach of technology could do, especially in a poor area of the country that I live in Memphis, where 40% of the people are on welfare. So there wasn't great internet connections. There's not a great deal of economic resources, and so you have to think about the ways of reaching these kinds of people, because we couldn't be together. So I think the biggest outcome for me is that I was able to not only teach my students, but teach my students how to teach students. So
that's brilliant.
That's the best thing.
Thank you, David. I love that. I love to teach this. Brilliant. And
sorry, could I just respond to this? Because I love the fact you said the lack of pedagogy. I'll be very quick, but that really sparkled to me, because I totally agree that we're trying to transfer what we do to a complete, you mentioned the online format. I think it is a different format. We need a different type of pedagogy. We are adapting because of the emergency teaching, but now that we're coming out of the pandemic, hopefully, it's not adaptation anymore. I think it's a new medium. We really need to invest in teaching our students.
I would say to my colleagues here and to my colleagues here that if you go back to your institutions and are talking about this with your administration, it is really vitally important that, at the graduate level, even at the undergraduate level, that we try to incorporate into the curriculum some kind of teaching module that addresses online teaching as well. It's not the same as just putting up a camera and going. Just like it's not the same as acting in a theater and acting for the camera.
Thank you. Jesper.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I've heard a lot of very good points now from the others, but I could add a few things that we were actually in Copenhagen quite surprised of the work to take all these experiences we've had with using dedicated distance learning studios and high-speed networks, taking all of those experiences and then boil them down to something, as we heard earlier, very simple, that can be used on a home system for home teaching. But we had to do that, and I actually think that we managed quite well, but it was pretty surprising. We thought, we are already experts in all of this, and then suddenly it was actually quite different. But on the other side, it turned out that many of our teachers and our students, they actually had a lot of very different experiences and skill sets that they could sort of use also. So there was a bit of a surprise that the people, they were very well, they were very constructive and very creative in finding a lot of different solutions. So that was a very nice thing. I can mention a short example of something that our head of brass, Jesper Windal, he did. He has locally in Copenhagen, he always had brass warm-up every morning with all students in a hall, and they play together exercises before the day starts. And that was the kind of thing that he was very nervous that you will have to stop this, because one thing is to translate one-on-one teaching to home teaching, but how do you do warm-up with 50 brass players? But he found very quickly that he could actually do that. So he started doing warm-up sessions on Zoom instead, he will play something, and the others, they have to mute their microphone and then just repeat what he played. And this turned out to be a quite big success. And suddenly people started joining in from all over the world because he opened up these sessions to everyone. They were there anyway. So there was a lot of Danish and international students here in Copenhagen, all over in their partners playing, but all over the world people joined in this global brass warm-up session. And for some it was a warm-down session late in the evening, depending on what time zone they were.
Right.
And they have actually kept this, as far as I know, one time every month they're still doing this online, and the rest of the time they're back in the hall. So I think that's a nice little story.
Oh, thank you so much. I love that. I absolutely love that. And if you have any recording of that, I would love to see that in action. That's so nice. And that, sorry, David, you.
I was going to say yes with audio. It's in the audio because it's quite entertaining, I think.
And I think that ties very, very nicely with my second question for you, which is, after all those changes and all those things that had to be redesigned, restructured, re-implemented, what do you think is the, let's say, biggest or more significant thing for you that is going to stay? Like what changed for good for you?
Starting with me, okay. There is something that I've learned and I've kept for my now also for my lessons now without the lockdown. So as the quality of sound in Zoom, because we used Zoom, was better than the other platforms, thanks to the possibility to change the settings, the audio settings, but not really very good. I used to ask the students to prepare videos, so in advance they had to record the pieces that they wanted to work on. And we had created a YouTube channel, and they had to post a private YouTube channel, so just for us, for the class, and they had to post the video in advance. And so we started the lesson watching and listening the video, and on the screen we used to have the score. The first time, and then the second time we worked on the different part of the performance. We stopped, we discussed, and so on. So this part of the lesson was the most profitable one. When students play, they usually are not completely aware of what they really perform, on how they really perform. But if they are forced to listen to themselves, they become much more aware of what they have really done. And so this part of the distance lesson has to be kept and used much more than it usually is, because it's the best way to give a better awareness of the execution. They become also more critical, and it is better for them to improve their performance. This is what I think.
Thank you.
Interesting. I think the observation I'll make that was the most positive thing that will continue on. I am admitting I'm old. I'm over 60 years old. And I did not grow up with technology. I mean, in the US, we call us the baby boomers. And the gap between my generation and all of our kids has always been really big. And honestly, I didn't realize that I wasn't really using the technology that I had been corralling and leading and developing with internet to all these years. And the wonderful thing, the one other brief story was that I learned how to use Jacktrip. And I figured out how to set it up in my own home, which for me was kind of advanced. And what's so great is my generation got really comfortable digitally. And the reason I think that's really positive and important is because we have this knowledge base that was getting lost because we weren't digital. And now we're digital and we have our knowledge, and we're bridging this gap, a knowledge gap that I think was happening that shouldn't have been happening, but it was digital, not digital. And now everybody I know my age is so much more comfortable with technology, and their knowledge is coming back together. And I think that is a wonderful outcome.
Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. I think this gap and for me, the word is digital innovation in every single aspect. And you mentioned bringing this to the students. I've started 2 courses at the ICM, one at undergraduate level entitled Musicians in the Digital Age. The other one is postgraduate, called The Digital Musician, to prepare the students for the world they're going to live in and work in. But like you, I felt, but who am I to teach this? Because I don't know it myself. So it has pushed me to really study. Jack Tripp, I brought Sarah Weaver to talk to us, and I'm learning together with the students, which is fantastic. So I think that's one thing. The other side of it is the institution, and the RCM, for example, we've got a performance simulator now, and we can manipulate the audience, we can manipulate the jury, then measure the students' reaction to it. And Richard was telling me about a new digital innovation lab, which is in the plans, and we can talk to Richard later if you want to know more, but to simulate acoustics, which then can be linked to high-end collaborations that we are already involved with. So I think it's endless. We just have to keep playing catch up to learn, but together with our students without forgetting them. We're not going to learn first and then pass on. There's no time for this. It's too quick.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think a couple of things. I agree with all my colleagues. One of the things we know for sure through our research with demographics is that our traditional population of students in higher education is shrinking. It's shrinking at about 8% per year, believe it or not, year over year. We're already seeing those effects in the United States. There are far less freshmen or first-year students coming in, and that trend is probably going to maintain itself for the next 10 years. So one of the things that I think has been a large outcome from this that I've been pushing before the pandemic, but now it's becoming real to institutions because it's about money for them. And it's this. We are, for the first time, really considering an completely online performance degree at the graduate level, not at the undergraduate level, but at the graduate level, and specifically geared towards working professionals in the field, people that are in orchestras or in military bands or that are performing in theaters. Because we can do that now. And I think that's been the big takeaway from this pandemic. It's been, shall I say, the greatest thing that could ever happen to us in forwarding the idea of digital relevance in education. But again, the piece of pedagogy is the thing that makes it qualitative. And, you know, the quantitative part, we know we can do. That's why we're all here. We hear about amazing things. But I don't want anyone to forget here, especially those of you that are in IT, that it's the qualitativeness of what we do in the performing arts that is important. And Tom and I were talking just last night, but reminding us again that, you know, all of this digital stuff is not a substitute. We would all rather be in the room with each other. That's what the arts are about. But we've got to understand that there's another dimension and another platform. And I think what we're all striving for here is to make it as qualitative as possible. It's not the quantitative stuff. People like Claudio and Sven, they've worked out incredibly wonderful technologies that have the ability for us to have a qualitative experience, but it's really still up to the human beings to make sure that we ensure that. So, big takeaway for us, I think we're going to be offering a global degree in performance.
Brilliant. Jesper.
Yes, I could start by echoing what Lucy said, that this changeover from many teachers we see here, that they use recordings for students much more, also because it puts the student in a more performative space rather than a teaching space, and they need to work out, this is a performance that I would like to present to my teacher. So it actually it helps them a lot and focuses a lot. We even have one special instrument group where teacher actually says that the student progression was faster during the pandemic than normal. Not for all of them, but one group. And then I think also we see a new and a big openness to online teaching and blended learning in general. So whenever we have a new project, we see can we do some mixed project where we have some online and we have some synchronous and some asynchronous. Everyone now are curious about that and accepts that we can actually get something really good out of it. And we usually have some very good conversations around how do we have the digital and the physical frame around anything that we're doing. Do we really need to meet in person? Can we take a really short Zoom meeting in 10 minutes and that's it? And then we can save some time and spend that time being more together when it's really important and then enjoy that. Maybe even have an hour off earlier on Friday and then be together because of that added effectiveness. And it also has helped us sometimes, this openness, to make sure that we always have a good backup plan. When we make a project, it's more natural for us now to think, what if someone becomes sick? How can we still go through with this project? So we find maybe not always having to make so many panic solutions for a lot of things, because we already think about what if everything goes wrong. It's sort of natural to us now.
Thank you. I completely agree with all the points, and yeah, it's fascinating how many good things can actually come from something so terrible, and how we had to make our own way to make sure that not only we survive, but we can thrive from this experience. And I'm just conscious of time, and there's a question I really would like to ask you. So it would be probably a 30 seconds answer, like no more than that. But I really would like to ask you this question. I would start with you, Jesper. We go the opposite order.
Fair enough.
And my question is, like, if you could go back in time, say a time machine, you can go back 3 years from now, and if you could give an advice from a 3 year younger Jesper, Lucia, Anna, Tanya, and David, what advice would you give to a younger version of yourself? Like, what do you wish you knew before the pandemic? Very quickly, just.
Yes, okay, quick. I would say take a deep breath.
Like that.
And then take a whole day, 8 hours, and make sure to make a very good system of collecting experiences and resources for everyone. Because everyone were running around finding solutions, inventing things, and we didn't really get to have a system of collecting all the good experiences. It was one big chaos. So spend time having that would have been really good. It could have saved us a lot of time later.
Love that. David?
3 years ago, I would have sold everything and bought shares of Zoom.
That's fair enough. No, that's good advice.
No, and in all seriousness, I would have done that. But no, I think that for me, I would have acted more on my instincts, because I came to this workshop. I'm interested. How many people are here for the first time? Actually, that's wonderful. I was here for the first time. It's what inspired me, really. So I don't think I'll be inspiring, but you'll be inspired by the rest of these people. But I think I would have acted more at my institution to put infrastructure in place. I wasn't assertive enough, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Tanya?
For me, as a musician and as a teacher now, I think the word is experimentation, and have the courage to experiment. I think I was very much locked into traditional ways of teaching, trying to look for high-end tech, and the sound has to be perfect. And I think now we are much more resilient with all we've went through. Just have the courage to experiment. Nothing can go more wrong than it has already done so in the last 2 years.
Thank you. That's a very good point.
I think I would have told myself 3 years ago, be more curious about just even the technology in your home. Like when I had to find out how, like hooking an Ethernet cable up to the little jack trip box. I was like, where is the Ethernet cable? Like, I didn't even, like, where is my router? Well, it was hiding behind my TV. I just really didn't understand any of the systems I had in my own home and the capabilities I had. So I think I would say to myself 3 years ago, be more curious about, you deal with technology all day, but be more curious about your own technology and setup, and don't be afraid of it. Be curious about it.
Thank you. That's wonderful advice.
An advice for me for 3 years ago, get some technological knowledge. That's all. Get some. Yeah.
Forward.
This is what I missed a lot 2 years ago.
Well, thank you very, very much. And it's been a pleasure to be here with you and listen to you and learning. I learned so much. So thank you very much for being here. And I would like to thank you all for your wisdom, for sharing that with us. Thank you for your patience. And yes, if there is any comment, it would be wonderful to hear from you.
Yes, I'm Peter from Germany, Robert-Schumann-Hochschule in Düsseldorf. I have a question. I'm not a musician teacher, and all of you are musicians and musical teachers. First time I saw Lola session was 2014 in Helsinki, and I was so impressed of this. It's a guitar lesson, I think, between Vienna and Helsinki, and from this time up, I want to implement distance learning in our university. And every time I talk to authorities or teachers to implement this, I feel the fear of teachers to be vergleichbar, equal to other teachers in other countries or in other music, in different music learning facilities or universities. Do you have any idea how to take this fear of some of the teachers away? That's my question.
Can I defer to Jesper, because he's been working with this for a long time, and he's taught us all, I think, a little bit about how to get started when you have pushback a lot from faculty.
Yeah, I can say one of the big pushbacks we found in the beginning was that many teachers were afraid that now we were not going to travel anymore. And that was not the case. They actually started traveling much more because we had so many international connections. Then I think it's a matter of also actually starting very simple, with a simple setup, with someone who's curious to try it out. And then once you have tried it, it's actually, I think many find it as if the technology is working good and transparent, then it's a very, very comfortable situation. And sometimes when we've all seen these remote performances together, it can almost be like, it can actually be quite touching, emotional thing to see. So it's a matter of just getting started and try it out, and then suddenly it's not so mysterious and so frightening. It's actually quite close to humans.
And I would say, Peter, just find someone on your faculty that wants to do it, and trying to impose it. It's the same at my institution. I mean, there are still people after this that are just, okay, thank God we don't have to do this anymore, and shut it down. but I think you need to find a willing participant, and like mold, it'll grow. You know, that's probably the wrong. Like a garden of flowers.
Yes,
it'll grow.
that's it. That's it.
Yeah, like wildflowers, David.
Wildflower, yeah, I think.
Can I give a suggestion? So, for example, distance lessons can also be used as sort of follow-up of a masterclass in presence. So if you send a teacher to another institution to give a masterclass, and then she comes back, and then after 1 month, for example, there can be a connection through internet. So so to check what happened to the same students. So this can be a starting point, for example. So you do not lose the physical contact because you have a masterclass in presence, but at the same time you can check what has gone during time. Yeah.
The other quick suggestion is sometimes they have colleagues abroad. So if they start working with their own colleagues, it eases into it, and then you can switch to other people who they don't know. But that worked very well for us at the beginning.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, again, thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your wisdom, for your patience, and thank you, Jesper, for joining us. Thank you all, really. Thank you. It was wonderful to listen to your stories and learn so much.